All right, Front Church, we are so excited to welcome Jon Fox today to the Front Church. He's a former youth pastor and a great friend of the Front Church. He's here with his wife and his 4 children. So give it up for Jon as he speaks to us today.
All right, thank you so much. It's good to be with you this morning. Anybody watching the Olympics right now? I am. I'm watching a little bit. Last night I was up looking over my notes and watching the golf. It was kind of crazy. And then all of a sudden, it was like 11:45 p.m. And I hear this noise in the distance that kind of sounded like this. And I was like, what is that? And we have a couple houses away from us. There's these 2 huskies that live there. And by huskies, I mean the type of dog, not the type of clothing that I used to wear when I was a kid, okay? Just to make that clear. But we can hear them howling sometimes, especially because we live pretty close to the police station. And when the police cars go, the sirens go, the huskies howl with them, and it's kind of fun. But I don't think that was it. And I heard it again. I heard this noise, and I sat up, attentive on the couch, and I was like, what's going on? Okay, we've got a 2-month-old who's right there, Jack. And I was like, maybe that's him, right? I need to go upstairs and make sure that it's not him, because if he's crying, I want to make sure that my wife doesn't have to deal with it. Like, I'm awake still. I can go help him. She needs all the rest that she can get because she is with him all the time. And as I ran up the stairs to make sure and see what was going on, I realized it wasn't Jack. It was my 3-year-old, Kate. And she was wailing in her sleep, not in her sleep. She wasn't sleeping this late at night. She's doing this like cry whine that you can't understand, and it takes a really trained ear to figure out exactly what she's saying. But anyways, about 30 to 45 minutes after some like real impressive interpretation skills on my part, I'm going to pat myself on the back, right? I got her calmed down, and she was talking normal again and ready to go back to sleep. Sometimes being a parent is tiring. Wait, let me rephrase that. Often, being a parent is tiring. Wait a second, let me rephrase that for all the moms. Being a parent is really tiring, isn't it? All the time, right? Yeah, I know it's different for moms, and that's why we're so thankful for you. But yes, it's very tiring. And I often find myself craving rest. I just need some rest. But the rest that I crave is not always that physical, like I need to sleep. The rest that I crave often is actually rest for my soul. Rest on the inside. Like peace for me inside. Internal rest. And I think there's lots of things that can steal or rob my rest that I'm craving in my soul. See, I love being a dad. I do. I really do love it, to my 4 kids. But it's not always easy, is it? Right? Being a parent. And sometimes when I'm dealing with a 30-minute tantrum that feels like a 30-hour tantrum, I need some rest from my soul. And sometimes when one of my older daughters starts yelling at everyone in the house because we did the horrible thing of asking her to take a shower. In those moments, I go, I need some rest for my soul. Like, I just need some rest. I mean, we're so terrible, right? I mean, take a shower, can you believe that? In these moments, right, I feel like I need some more rest. Or one of the things that causes or robs rest in my life is when I put off doing a task that I know I need to get done. And there's a deadline looming. And it's there, and I know it's there, and yet I don't do it. You see, I have a black belt in procrastination. I'm so good at it, I don't even need to try to do it. It just is what happens. It's a natural thing that I tend to do, and I've had to work really hard at it. But even though I have this deadline that I know is out there, and I have opportunities to work on this task, I'll go, it's not quite yet. It's not urgent enough. I don't need to work on it yet. But what happens in those times is when I know that there's something that I need to do, something that needs to get done, it robs me of rest. I can't relax when I have the time to do it because I'm not doing it. And I know that I need to do it or it'll need to get done later. And it's just something inside. It just nags at me, the back of my mind. I know I should work on it, but I usually don't. I like to wait till the last minute because then all of a sudden I get this energy, right, to get it done. But that robs me of rest. It's why I always hated when teachers would assign homework during spring break. It's like, come on! This is the time where I'm supposed to catch my breath, relax, take a week off, and be ready to come back. And I would always wait until Sunday. It's just the way it happened. The Sunday before we came back, I would always wait. And then I would have to get it done and scramble. But the whole week, right, I'd be able to sleep. But every time I think about it, I go, yeah, homework. Especially when I actually cared about my grades and what I did, right? Like I was just, it would rob me of rest. I couldn't relax and get refreshed and be re-energized. Because I don't think you can fully rest when you know that there's something that you need to do. There's something left that needs to be done. You can't truly rest. Does anybody else relate to that? Can you relate? Does knowing that there's something that needs to get done rob you of rest in your life? Maybe for you it's something else. And I think if we really were to think about it and really dig down and inspect our lives, there's lots of things in life that can rob us of rest. The rest that we need for our souls. And sometimes it's physical things. And I know that can rob us of physical rest, but I think there's physical things that happen. I think there's problems that can rob us of rest for our souls. There's issues that don't seem to go away, and those can turn into worry of what's wrong with me or what's going to happen, or it turns into anxiety and then fear. It's like the time when I was a kid and I popped a Snapple cap. Do you remember when you could pop Snapple caps? Popped a Snapple cap in my ear, and then all of a sudden I heard this ringing in my ear, and for 30 minutes I was alone in my room having a meltdown internally because I thought, am I going to go deaf? Like, what is going to happen to me? If I don't go deaf, am I going to hear this for the rest of my life? Like, I was so worried until I forgot about it. And like, it must have gone away. But that seems silly, but there are real things that I think we experience, physical things, and we go, is this something I should be worried about? And then we start to worry, or we get concerned, or about the people that we care about. We worry about their physical issues, and it robs us of rest. It wears us down. Maybe for you, it's relational issues. Like relationship problems that you don't have resolved. There's tension or conflict with someone that's meaningful to you in your life. It could be your significant other, one of your kids, one of your parents, just a really good friend. Maybe they hurt you in some way. And you know that you need to bring it up and get it out in the open. You don't want to sweep it under the rug, right? Because it'll just come out later. You know that you should do it. You should bring it up. You should confront them. But, man, it's really hard to do that. And it's always there. Whenever you see that person, or you see something they posted on social media, you're reminded of the way that they hurt you, and it robs you of rest. Or when you do see them, you make up excuses of why not to bring it up. You go, well, it just didn't come up in the conversation, and you just keep holding on to it and holding on, and this can rob you of rest, the rest that you crave in your soul. maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you did something to hurt that other person. You know you did something wrong. You know you hurt them. And the guilt that you feel eats at you and it's robbing you of rest. Because you know you need to approach them, apologize, make it right, be honest. But that's hard to do. Maybe for you it's just personal, internal conflicts about your identity, who you are, your self-image, doubts you have about your value. These things will rob you of rest for your soul. You might ask, am I good enough? Or what gives me value? Or there might be past hurts and pain that is just still there. And it robs you of rest. Maybe for you it's a spiritual thing, right? I think it's all related, but questions about who God is. Or am I good enough for God? Or how good is good enough actually? Like, what is enough? Or what is the truth? Is God even real? And if he is, does he even care about me? There's so many people. Does he even care about me? Like, maybe that is what robs you of rest. Maybe you feel like you've let God down in some way. Or you just can't get it right. You fail so often. You try, but you just can't get it right. And you feel like maybe God's mad at you. See, when we experience these doubts and these fears, they rob us of rest for our souls. We crave it. We need, and we want this peace and this rest. And maybe you are able to identify with these rest robbers that I've talked about. Maybe yours looks a little different. Not exactly something I've said, but I guarantee that everyone here can single out things that rob them of rest on the inside, right? Like things that just creates this tension and rubs you and eats at you. And the cool thing is that people 2,000 years ago were not much different than us, right? They experienced things that robbed them of rest too, and even though their circumstances and their lifestyles were much different than ours today, see, Jesus showed up to a group of people who were just as tired and worn out on the inside, maybe more. See, Jesus shows up to this culture that was extremely, extremely religious. The Jewish people, they worked tirelessly to live out their faith, to accomplish the law, right? To live out the law, but they were stuck in this cycle of trying to live out and follow 613 different laws and regulations. I'll say that again, 613 different laws and regulations that God had given to them through Moses. They would try their best, most of them, right? They try their best, but what happens? Ultimately, they would fail. They can't do it. They couldn't measure up. And so they would need to then provide a blood sacrifice through an animal offering to pay the price for their sin and get cleansing. And then they try it again. Work their best. Ultimately fail. And then offer sacrifice to get cleansed. And then repeat. They will work. Fail. Cleanse, repeat. Work, fail, cleanse, repeat. Work, fail, cleanse, repeat. Over and over and over again. This is how they lived out their relationship with God. And I feel like that would get old really, really fast. It does get old really, really fast. I know, because I've tried this at times of my life, of trying to be my best for God and realizing I can't do it, and then asking God for forgiveness and then trying again. And realize, working as hard as I can, trying to avoid sinning as much as possible, and then failing. And asking God, I'm terrible, I'm the worst, I can't do this, and then trying it again and over and over and over again, and it's hard. There's no rest in that. And with the law, back then, there was all these different rabbis, and at the time, each one would kind of have their own flavor of how to follow and interpret the law, to live it out. And so depending on which rabbi you followed, that would determine the way that you would try to live out the law and follow it, right? Fulfill it. One would say that you need to wash your hands this way. One would say you need to wash your hands that way. All sorts of different things, right? Well, there was another group of people at the time who were the religious best of the best. Okay? They were like religious law attorneys who knew the law backwards and forwards, inside and out. They had it memorized. And they were the unquestioned best at following it to the T, to the letter of the law. This is what they did, which is pretty great. Sounds great, right? I mean, they can do it. They can live it out. They've got it going on. I mean, they should be the people whose examples we're wanting to follow, right? Because evidently they're doing it. They're doing what I can't do. How do they do this, right? This group of people were called the Pharisees. And you may have heard of them. If not, it's okay. But if you have, you might remember that, Jesus wasn't a big fan of these guys, right? He actually has a lot of confrontations with them. And they don't like Jesus because he's coming to change things up, to change the way things happen. And it's too new and too different, and they can't handle it. And Jesus actually calls them whitewashed tombs in Matthew 23. What does that mean? Whitewashed tombs. It means they look clean and beautiful and perfect on the outside. A tomb that's whitewashed, made white, made to look good. See, they did all the right things. They said all the right things. They had an answer for everything, and I'm sure people admired them often. People looked up to them, but on the inside, he said, they're a tomb. They're full of dead things inside. They're dead on the inside. But also, being full of dead things on the inside means that they're unclean. You see, according to the law, if you were around a dead body for any reason, you were considered ceremonially unclean. And there was a list of things that you need to do to make yourself clean again. Do you know anyone like that? Who looks great on the outside? They got it all together. They drive a nice car. They always dress good. They're in great shape. They got whatever it is. They do all the right things, say all the right things, but you can tell that there's something hurting inside. It's not all there. Just the outward appearance is great, but man, you see it. You catch a glimpse. Outburst of anger or something. Look great on the outside, but on the inside, they're a mess. Maybe you're like that. I don't know. Sometimes I feel that way. You see, some people are really great at putting on a facade, in getting the world to believe that they've got it all together. Everything is great, but on the inside, they're dead. They feel empty. There's no rest. And this is the culture that Jesus came to. You got people trying really, really hard, failing, getting cleansed, for doing it all over again. You got people who are like, got this. We can do it. Look, we're doing it. And this is the culture Jesus comes to. And he comes to them at one point in the beginning of his 3 years of teaching and healing and stuff. He comes to them during this, he gives this message that's called the Sermon on the Mount, and he's speaking to this group of people who think, right, they've got it all figured out, that they can do it. They're good enough. And he starts saying things like, well, you think you're doing fine because you haven't murdered anyone, right? Like, you haven't actually gone and killed someone. But that's just the outward act, he says. He's like, you think that's good enough? No, that is not even, he says, if you even looked at someone in anger, you're guilty on the inside and you are subject to judgment. Like, it's not just about the outward actions, it's about what's happening on the inside too. He even says, like, he goes to say something about adultery. He says, oh, great, so you haven't actually physically stepped out on your husband or wife, but you think that's enough? No. If you even have looked at someone and wanted them, you've committed adultery in your heart. Like, it's not just enough that you're not doing it. It's like the inside counts too. And it matters. See, what Jesus is doing here is he's pointing out to people who are lying to themselves, who think, we can do this. We can be good enough. We've figured out the system. We know all the things to do, all the things to not do. We've got it. But they're doing all the right things for all the wrong reasons. And on the inside, they're a mess. And what he's pointing out is that they've got no chance. They can't do it. They can't perform good enough. See, Jesus, he's not trying to add more burdens to people's lives with this. Okay? I don't think that's what he's doing. I think what he's really doing is he's raising the bar so that people will realize that they need to stop trying. They can never do it. They can never meet his expectation. What he's trying to point out to people is that their efforts are futile. It won't work. One of the things that I love about Jesus, and I mean, there's so much, right? But one of the things that I think is really cool is that the people that he spends most of his time with in his 3 years of ministry are not the people that you would kind of expect. They're not the best of the best. They're not the most educated. They're blue-collar workers. They're people that everyone hates. Tax collectors, right? They're sinners. They're not the people that you'd pick first if you're picking teams. But these are the people that Jesus spends time with. And we see this throughout the Gospels. We see that the people that respond to Jesus the most are the ones who can identify their need the most. The ones who understand that they don't have it all figured out. That they're tired and they need rest for their souls. And in Matthew 11, this is where we see Jesus offer them invitation. He says this. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus offers an invitation to these tired and worn down people who are craving rest for their souls. You see, only Jesus can provide rest for your soul. Only Jesus can provide rest for your soul. Only Jesus can provide rest for my soul. In the book of Hebrews, which is kind of towards the end of the New Testament, the author lays out in chapter 3 that back in the day when God's people were rescued out of slavery, right, from Egypt, the Exodus, God used Moses to help rescue them out of slavery. And God performed all these miracles, all these signs, all these wonders. He saved their lives. He freed them from slavery. And he talks about in chapter 3 of Hebrews that there is this group of people among the Israelites that will never find rest. He actually says they will never enter his rest. The ones that will never be able to enter God's rest are the ones, it says, that who refused to believe. And he talks about in this chapter this sin of unbelief. It's actually the only sin that the book of Hebrews actually talks about. So later on, there's this point where it's like, oh, if you keep on sinning, right, there's no more forgiveness for you or something like that, right? But the only sin that the author has referred to this whole time is this sin of not believing. It says there's this group of people, they will never enter his rest because they refused to believe. They saw all this stuff. God's love was shown to them clearly, and they refused to believe him, to continue to believe him. But it says that we can still experience this rest. We can experience this rest. In Hebrews 4, verses 9 through 11, it says this: there remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Verse 11, it says, let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. Whose example? Well, the people back in the Exodus who refused to believe. That was their great disobedience, is they didn't believe God. They refused. So how is it that we enter this rest that Jesus has for us? How do we do it? How do we receive the rest for our souls that we're so craving and longing for? Is that we believe. We believe that Jesus is who he says he is. We trust in his performance, not our performance. At one point in the book of John, some people come and ask Jesus some questions, and they ask him, what must we do to do the works that God requires? Jesus, what must we do to do the works God requires? And Jesus answered, the work of God is this. Not works, but the work of God is this: to believe in the one he has sent. Wait, the work of God is not to be a good person. It's not to help the needy or something that we think should be more like honorable and stuff, or that we look at and go, well, that'd be great. No. The work of God is to believe in Jesus. In Hebrews 4, right, we just read that we are to try really, really hard to enter that rest. That's kind of what we're supposed to do. Like, if you want to work at something hard, being a Christian, or following Jesus, work really hard to rest. Which sounds backwards, right? We don't do that. We go, no, we need to work so that we can rest. Work hard so we can play hard. Work hard so we can rest hard, right? But this is saying the exact opposite. No. The hard work is to rest. We make every effort to rest. And how do we do that? The rest comes from believing in Jesus. And maybe you're thinking that's too easy. That can't be it. Right? Like, is it really that easy? Is it? Is it really that easy? Well, is it actually easy? That's my question. Like, to believe in Jesus means that I'm not going to trust in my ability or my performance to earn anything from God. Is that easy? Because if it's easy for you, well, you're better than me, because it's really hard for me. I want to do things. That's the way life is supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard. Anything that's worth having is supposed to be difficult and hard. You're supposed to work at it. And I'm not saying working hard is a bad thing. Hard work is great. But when it comes to finding rest, we don't find rest by doing something. We find rest by believing Jesus. And I think that's actually really difficult. Because my tendency is to do the opposite. It's to try and earn things. You see, all the promises of God are yes in Jesus. He's accomplished everything for us. And we get to trust and rest in what he's done and in who he is. So how do we live this out, right? How do we live out this and work really hard at resting? I want to read this passage in Matthew 11 again really quickly, but in a different translation. I just really love the way that the Message translation puts these verses. And it says this: are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Well, come to me. Remember, this is Jesus. He says, get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. It says, walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. The phrase, learn the unforced rhythms of grace, has just always stuck out to me. It just always resonated with me. See, Jesus is giving us a clue here how we work at resting and living life with him once we trust in him. You see, when we place our faith in Jesus, when we believe in him, the Bible tells us that we're made new. We're completely changed. God does spiritual heart surgery. In 2 Corinthians, it says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, and the old is gone. The new is here. You are made different. You've been transformed. You get to live life with Jesus. And so how do we do that? How do we live this out? It's supposed to be easy and light. Unforced rhythm. I'll tell you what it's not. It's not following a list of rules, a list of do's and don'ts. Those are outward actions. It's about, right, believing in Jesus, trusting him, the unforced rhythm. I started looking into, a while back, I was looking at rhythm and heartbeats. You know your heartbeat has a rhythm to it? Do you know what happens when someone's heartbeat doesn't follow the rhythm? There's this thing called atrial fibrillation. And that's when your heart kind of gets out of its normal rhythm. And some of the symptoms that can happen is like you get, people get dizzy, they get weak, sometimes they even faint. Like it causes all these problems because the heart is just like, it wants to be in a certain rhythm and it gets off. And I think that's what happens when we're not looking at Jesus and believing in him. We get out of rhythm. But we're supposed to follow this unforced rhythm. There was a study done, this research study, where people, they hooked up a heart rate monitor and a respiration monitor to these people who were in a romantic relationship, and they had them sit across the table staring into each other's eyes. And what they noticed, okay, is that as they did this, the people, their heart rates and their breathing rates started to try and sync up. They became closer to each other as they stared into each other's eyes. But when they tried the same thing with people who they didn't have a relationship with, they didn't notice the same effect. It was different. How do we learn the unforced rhythm of grace? I think we stare into Jesus' eyes. We look at who he is, what he's done. We become enamored with his performance and not our performance. We care more about what he's done for us than what we can do for him. And it's when we do that, when we start to look at him, that's when the outward starts to look better naturally and freely. As we stare into Jesus' eyes and thank him for what he's done, we start to live different life. And it's easy. And it's free. And we start to understand, oh, this is what he meant. We get rest for our souls. It's easier for me to not explode at my daughter when she gets mad at me for telling her to take a shower, right? I handle that way better when I'm resting in Jesus and what he's done. I want to change my son's diaper more often when I'm resting in what Jesus has done. I handle the conversation with my boss differently when he's not happy with my work. When I'm resting in what Jesus has done for me and I'm staring into his eyes and walking with him, it becomes easy and light and free. And so imagine what life could be like if we do that. If we rest in Jesus and believe in him and trust what he's done and not rely on ourselves. You might find rest for your souls because it is only Jesus that can provide rest for your souls. Will you pray with me?